That's the way AA is supposed to work. And she's right. That is the way AA is supposed to work. But it doesn't always work that way. And Bill Wilson would totally agree with my wife that that's the way AA is supposed to work. But he would also agree with me that it doesn't always work that way. And here's one of my favorite Bill Wilson quotes about that. This is a long quote, but basically he says, what if we had said this was a Christian society? A lot of people wouldn't have been able to join. And you can imagine how they might feel if, let's say, AA had started in Japan and was a Buddhist organization, and they told you couldn't join unless you were Buddhist. You might well turn your face to the wall and die. And that's why we need a secular meeting space. That's why I need a secular meeting space. Safe, open, welcoming, so I don't have to turn my face to the wall and die because I'm being pushed into a God or a religion that I cannot and will not embrace. So to be very clear, yes, the AA message in the big book is religious and is Christian. Yes, they thought if I stayed around long enough, did the steps, followed the instructions, I would have a religious experience of a Christian variety. And they toned down the language a little, right, with God as you understand God and choose your own conception of God. But yeah, it's still God. And the intent is still there. And the last line of the doctor's opinion, right? Dr. Silkworth says, I earnestly advise every alcoholic to read this book through, and though perhaps he came to scoff, he may remain to pray. Yeah, so that's the intent, but that's okay. It's not a hidden agenda. It was a very clear agenda. So why would I read and study this book? Because I can say no thank you to the religious idea. And yes, please tell me more about it, to all the rest of it. And I read and study the big book in a group of like-minded people because everybody has a unique understanding of the steps and the AA program. And I am passionately curious to hear all of it from everybody. And Bill Wilson, I know, would 100% agree. We have lots of quotes from him that make it real clear that he would agree with that. And here's what he said at the GSO in 1953, right? You can rewrite the steps, do whatever you want. They're suggestions. So that's it on why a secular big book study, because we need one, because I need one. And I'm so grateful to Heidi for starting this. So the other thing I'm supposed to talk about is, what are we reading tonight? Why do we have to read all the boring front matter? When Heidi first talked to me about this meeting, I was really excited, and she was telling me all about it, and she was excited and I was excited. And I said, so are you going to start on like page Roman numeral 1 and go straight through? And she said, well, no, I thought we'd start with the doctor's opinion. And I was just trying to have a conversation, not be a know-it-all old timer, but I was not controlling my face apparently. And she said, what? And I said, well, we always start with the preface and the forewords. And she said, why would we read those? And I'm sorry to say that my first thought was because that's the way we've always done it, right? Every big book study I've been to, but that's not an adequate answer. So I went back this afternoon and I read and listened to the audio of all the forwards and the preface. And there's other reasons I think that it's important and interesting to read the forwards and the preface. There's a little bit of AA history. There's the origin of some of the familiar phrases and ideas we hear in meetings, and there's the beginnings of the 12 traditions. So if you're at all interested in history, the forward to the second edition is the longest one. It's 7 or 8 pages, and it's chock full of history. The other forwards are basically 1 page or 2 pages, a lot of statistics, that's about it. And here's just a couple of things that you might run across tonight if you're interested, just sort of some highlights. Right off the bat, right, title page, men and women have recovered from alcoholism. So right away we have the controversial recovered word. Recovered, recovering, in recovery, a recovering person. People say all sorts of things. I don't have opinions on any of that. That's where the word came from, is right there on the title page, recovered. You'll also hear old timers in meetings sometimes say, well, the basic textbook says blah, blah, blah. And this is why they say that. It's in the preface, calls it our basic text. You'll also hear the first 164 pages have never been changed. They never have and they never will. Yeah, not true. They've been changed, little grammatical corrections here and there, addition of a word, taking out a word. The first 164 pages are largely untouched, the preface says, but not 100% untouched. The doctor's opinion is just as it was written in 39, but there have been some little changes here and there. Like the stories, they always put new stories in every edition. So if you're 20 years old trying to get sober in 2023 and reading the stories from 1939, it's not going to do you a lot of good. They've just closed the call for stories for the new 5th edition. It'll come out and it'll have all new stories that people can relate to, hopefully. We get the primary purpose of the book to show others how precisely what we did. Got a little information about anonymity. It's always supposed to be public anonymity, right? You weren't ever supposed to keep yourself a secret from people in your meeting. Oh, I need to go visit Mary at the hospital. Mary who? Oh, tall Mary with the blonde hair. Yeah, no. It was about press, radio, films, TV, and Zoom. And a lot of us who say our whole names in meetings have kind of had to rethink that with Zoom, because Zoom is closer to media than an in-person meeting. And looking to GSO for some guidance, they're advising last initials only, but that is totally anybody's decision. Here's one of the places the first 164 was changed. It used to say the only requirement for membership is an honest desire to stop drinking. Yeah, we're not always very honest. We want to maybe get our car license back, or keep our kids, or keep our job, or save our marriage. But honestly, stop drinking, not so much. So they took it out so more people could be a member. It's not until the 2nd edition forward that we start to hear the word God or spiritual. And the second bullet is interesting to me. This is talking about Dr. Bob, and it says he was convinced, right, of the need for moral inventory, confession, restitution, helpfulness, and the necessity of belief in and dependence upon God. Dr. Bob was convinced of this. That's great. I'm not. I don't have to be, right? That's the whole point here. There was an article that titled Alcoholics and God. We have the idea of working one with another is vital to recovery. And we have the flat out statement, Alcoholics Anonymous is not a religious organization. Forward to the 3rd edition, we get the first sharing experience, strength, and hope. I think that's the first time that phrase pops up. I could be wrong. Please correct me if I'm wrong. And then the 4th edition talks about computers, brings in the age of Zoom. That is it for me.